Alright, so we're going to start our second assignment, and it's photo retouch. So I have this picture here, and you'll have this picture as part of your files. And we're just going to retouch some of the items inside of this picture. So the first thing I like to do is just kind of make a list of all the things I want to adjust. Okay, so right off the bat, reduce wrinkles. And this is just in certain areas we're going to reduce them, and in other areas we're actually going to remove wrinkles. Okay, sometimes you can get away with removing them. Sometimes it's better to reduce them so they don't look so so drastic from the original picture. Whiten teeth. Let's go and darken the background slightly. And then a cleanup work we might have on the face as far as spots. You can see he has something here on his lip, another spot here, another spot there. And we don't want to remove all of these, but it's something that we should do just to kind of clean up some of the image a little bit. He also has some hair in here, so we'll clean the hair on his nose. He also has some stubble in here. There's a spot on his lip there. Okay, well, wipe my screen just to see what's actually dirt and what's not. Okay, so we're just going to keep this pretty simple. We may even do some modifications to him a little bit more, but for now let's start with this list. Okay, and just as an example of what we're doing here, this is obviously a lot more wrinkles and a lot more stuff going on here. You could reduce some of this, but you can see the amount of work that would have to be done here is much more extensive than something here. Okay, so this is where we're starting off, but these tools would apply to something like this. It's just a matter of you going through and tweaking those kinds of things. This is kind of neat too. His eyes are pretty clear, so we could actually change the color of his eyes if we wanted to. Okay, so let's start off simple with this one. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to open up this file. So I can go to File, Open inside here, or I can just drag this right into a blank Photoshop area. And you'll see it's thinking. Once it's done thinking, that it actually opens up our image. Here we go. And if I go to my image up here, oops, and I go to image size, I like to look at the image size and just see what the image size is. Okay. Now, I don't really care about the width and height because I'm not printing this. If I was printing this, I would care about the width and the height of this image. Also, I would care about the resolution. Okay? Because we're just looking at this on screen, I look at the pixel count. Okay? So this one has 3,500 pixels left to right by 2,300 pixels top to bottom. Alright? So that's kind of what I look at in here, unless I was going to print with this, unless I was putting this in an ad or whatever. You'll see I can also move this around just to get a different sample of it. And the reason I can do that is I could say, let's make this image 1 inch by 0.667, and then you'll be able to see the quality of this image if I did change it, what that's in there. Now this is a CC feature. This is not a CS6 feature. Okay, just so you're aware that this is not something you'd find in CS6. Alright, also one thing I'm going to point out, let me cancel that, is if this image is really grainy like we just saw, and I just took the resolution, okay, the resolution here is dots, how many dots are in a single inch. Okay, you can see all the dots that are right here. By just upping this to 300, you can see that it doesn't really add more detail, it just kind of fuzzes the detail that's in there. Okay, so just by taking this and making it 300 doesn't actually make it 300. Okay, it does make it 300, but it's not going to give you more resolution in an already bad image. Alright, so I just wanted to see. This comes in handy when you're picking your brushes, because this brush is, right now it's a 150 pixel brush. So as I look at the brush here, I know that 150 in this image is obviously going to be a lot different than 150 in something that's a much smaller image. Okay. So now that we're editing this image, one thing I like to make sure I do is I never want to destroy this actual image here. Okay, I have my layers pulled out right here, and you can just find those under Window Layers, hit F7, whatever, and I pulled it out just so it's off to the side. I can hide those other ones. These layers that are here, sorry, I'm just going to collapse that. That gives me a little more room. The layers that are here, I don't want to destroy the original stuff. That way I can never get back to it. If I go down here to make a new layer, then I can make changes to this new layer and it won't affect the original image. Okay, and that's very important because sometimes you'll do a change to this picture and then someone will say, well, can you bring it back down a little bit? You know, you took the wrinkles out too much, now he looks plastic. And then you have to be able to go back and remove those pixels. Okay. Also, as we're going through this, we're using the paintbrush a lot. Okay, this is the paintbrush, but we're also using this next tool, which is a clone stamper. Okay, and this is basically if I use my button up here to switch my brush to a bigger brush, or if I use my right bracket. Okay, you'll see that we basically have a paintbrush here as well. So a lot of these paintbrushy type tools have similar settings up here. Here's opacity, here's flow. Go to this one, here's opacity, here's flow. Okay, if I go to the eraser even, here's opacity, here's flow. Okay, so I want to, oops, I painted right on there. I want to make sure that you understand those things as we go. Okay, so we'll get to those as well. Also, one thing I want to note is that sometimes what we're going to do is try to keep things organized in a per item fashion. Okay, I don't want to make one layer, do all my changes to that one layer. Let's just pretend that we're doing this, and then leave everything here. What I want to do, let me delete that, is I'll do this. I'll make some changes to this layer, I'll go to another layer, make some changes, go to another layer, make some changes. Okay, and that way I can easily turn on, turn off, or turn down any one of these layers. Okay, and here's even, look at opacities right here. I could turn down the opacity just on that one, or I could turn the opacity even lower on the one below it. Okay, really important things just to help keep us managed. Alright, so let's get started. So let's make a new layer, and I'm going to go to this heal tool. Okay, and if I hold the button down, you see there's a spot healing and there's a healing brush. Okay, so I'm going to go to the let's go to spot healing first. Okay, now right now it's not sampling all layers. You see where it says sample all layers? It's not. So I want to sample all layers, that way it samples the stuff below. So I'm going to zoom in, so I hold down Control and the spacebar and I zoom in, or I believe you can hold down Z and also zoom in and out, and I'm just clicking and dragging to the left and right. Okay, drag to the right, zooms in, drag to the left, zoom out. Okay, so I'm in the healing brush. I've zoomed in a bit. I'm going to hold down the spacebar and just scoot us over. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to paint over one of these little dots and then let go. And you'll see that this spot healing brush automatically goes through and it doesn't just erase it, but it actually figures out what pixels it should be. Okay, let me find something a little bit more drastic so you can see that happen. I'm going to make my brush bigger, right bracket a couple times, come on. I'm locked. Oops, I'm not on the layer. There we go. So I'm just going to drag over here and let go. And what it's going to do is it doesn't just remove that, but it actually goes through and tries to find what pixels should be there, what colors should be there, and it replaces it with it. Okay, let me show that on this other one, the patch tool. On the patch tool, you can actually see that happen a little bit better. So if I go in the patch tool and I just kind of outline this shape, and then I click and oops, again, do this, yes, and then, oh, I'm not on the same layer. There we go. So if I go over here with the patch tool and I let go, you'll see that what it's going to do is take this color information and drop it into there. Okay, and you can see that it doesn't do a great job. Right here it looks very odd. Okay, so I'm just going to undo that. And as I undo, one thing you'll find about Photoshop is that I can't undo more than one thing at a time. So I hit Control Z, and it's just undoing that same command. So what I have to do is I have to figure out what it is. Control Alt Z, and what Control Alt Z does is it undoes more than one thing. Okay, so that's what the spot healing brush is doing. It's just doing it automatically without having to select it. Okay, so I'm going to get a thinner brush And I'd like to do this in kind of small strokes. Okay, I don't like to go too big because then I start getting some weird stuff happening. All right. And you can see here that there's a highlight here and here, but that spot that we cloned over is gone. Okay, so we'll fix that. Okay, and obviously these are the forehead spots that we're removing. Okay, so now if we look before and after, you can see what it looked like. We'll remove this guy too. Okay, and like I said, we don't want to remove everything. You know, the guy does have some character to him. Too much. I'm going to go in here and I'm going to take my brush softness or hardness and take it down some. That way it'll feather the edges a little bit more. No, it's too much. Sometimes it's just a matter of the area that you're shooting for. Just certain brush settings work better. There we go. Alright, now we have to be careful of repeating patterns. If you look here, it's kind of hard to see. Let me get my brush, my pointer. This line right here is the same as that line right there. Okay, so I don't want to have that. So I'm going to go over to this and just kind of clone that out. And there we go. Okay, so now we go back and forth. You can definitely see that now his wrinkles are all gone. Okay, and there's still some marks over here I want to just kind of blot out. There we go. So let's double click this layer and call this forehead wrinkles. Somewhat reason I keep adding a G. Alright, so we'll go to another new layer and I'm going to turn this one off. And we can just go through and we'll do just spots. So I'm going to shrink my brush to about the size plus a little bit of those spots. Exciting work. Okay, and you can see I'm just kind of going through and I'm just knocking these down. I'm getting rid of all of them at the moment. And eventually what I can do, like I said, is just kind of tone them down some. There we go. That one's still kind of bad. Let's do a big brush area here. Nope, see how we get a line there? All right. Sometimes you need a little bit more manual work. Yeah, that's good. There's a little spot right here I'm not really liking. Let me turn this one back on just so I can see where those are at. So I'll have to manually fix that one. A little bigger brush. See, I'm introducing too much white into there and the rest of that's red, so it looks kind of funny, so I'm just going to ignore that. Spot down here, spot over there. You don't want to remove everything because then they're going to look, you know, really, really fake, but I'm just kind of removing most of it now and I can always adjust them later. Oops. There we go. Alright, so now these will be face spots. I'll make another new layer. And on this one, let's go through and let's see. Oops, there's another face spot right here I want to get rid of. There we go. And we'll go back to this layer. We have to make sure we're on that same layer, because if I start clicking on these other ones, I'm going to start changing those as well, and then I have to start breaking things apart, and that just becomes more difficult. Okay, so I'm making sure I'm on this top layer here, And then we can reduce some of these lines. I don't want to reduce too much because then he's going to look weird, just so you can see the example of what he's going to look like weird. If I start erasing this, even if it does a good job, you can see, wow, his cheek looks really puffed out there. Where here, you know, it just kind of separates it a little bit. All right, even if I go in with a bigger brush, oops, let's do a little motion there. See, it's not really capturing what we need it to capture. All right, so we're just going to leave that there. We can reduce some of these, but I think we're going to have to go with a different tool. Yep, not really liking that. Right. So going with a different tool for that. Okay, so our other tool, there's a healing brush tool, and once you kind of play with these, you get an idea of all of them. I have to make sure I go to all layers. So you can see what I'm doing here is I'm picking. I'm going to use the Alt key, and I'm going to pick. I'm going to say I want to choose from this area here, and then I'm going to start painting over there like I'm trying to erase something. And then what it does, it tries to blend these two things in together. Okay, so sometimes like this is good for things in this area where I can go on this line and then just kind of paint over that, and then it does a good job to kind of fill it in. Okay, or like on the nose, I'm just trying to blend in this to get rid of some of that hair. So I hold down Alt and click, I paint a little bit, and then it blends that texture in there, so now it gets rid of all those little nose hair spots. Okay. The other one that's similar to this is this rubber stamp tool or clone stamp tool, and this one doesn't do any blending. It just does exactly what you want it to do. Okay, so for instance, let me just take this eye and I put the eye up here. Oops, make sure I tell it to sample all layers. So I'm going to Alt, click on the eye, and I can just paint, and you'll see that now the eye is on his forehead, and there's no blending that happens. It's just automatic drop, there it is. Okay, so that's good for stuff like this, where I know exactly I'm going to Alt click here or here, there we go, and kind of fill that in just to kind of soften that. Okay, so now I've gotten rid of, there was a bump there, so now that bump's gone. And I can do the same thing on the nose. You know, once we get to these areas, I just want to basically cover this up. So I'm Alt clicking in an area, and then I'm filling it in. Now, it's never a good idea to do these at full blast. Okay, right now I'm doing these at full flow, full opacity. I want to actually take down the flow to, let's say, 8%. Okay, and what that means is that as I start painting, let me go to a different thing just so you can see this. Okay, if I take my flow, it's at 100 right now with a regular brush, I get full black. My color's black, I chose black, I'm painting black. But if I take this flow down to, let's say, 3%, what's happening is that it's spraying out 3% of that black. And then as I start painting and painting and painting, it's just adding that black on top of that color. Okay? Now that's different than opacity. In opacity, if I take this down to 3%, there we go, and I start painting, the most I'm ever going to get out of this is 3%. It's never going to add up to 100%. Okay, and it looks fake. You can tell that it looks fake. All right, well here this looks like an actual good color blend. So a lot of times we choose flow over opacity for that. Okay, so we can grab a sample and just start painting it in. And what's going to happen is that color is just going to add on top of it and create a new color that will kind of blend all this stuff together. Okay, so we're also going to remove the highlight on his nose just so his face doesn't look too oily. There we go, and I think I want to add a little bit more of this lighter color right in here. Okay, and the tip of his nose, it's square, I mean that's how his nose is, but I think I want to just adjust it, but I'll adjust that on a different layer. Okay, I'm going to leave his stubble there, because I think the stubble kind of adds to his picture. And right here you can see I've gone and I've removed too much of his skin pore. There's a lot of skin pore all over his face, here, 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 and here there's none. Okay, so this is where we could take that opacity and just kind of knock it back a bit. That way we still have maybe a little bit of shine there, but it's nowhere near what he had before. Okay, we can also take down some of these wrinkles, so this is just like an overall adjustment. So I've alt-clicked over here, and I'm just painting on top of this. And then I'll alt-click there, and just get in a little bit more darkness. There we go. Okay, now I'm not using a tablet. If you're doing this professionally, a tablet is a great help. It just really kind of seals the deal. It makes you really much more confident in your drawing ability. And here I'm just softening his eyes some, so we don't have as many wrinkles up here. Okay. Now we want to zoom out every once in a while and just take a look and make sure we're doing good and not doing bad. Okay, so overall I think we're doing good. Okay, right now we're just lightening these lines. The lighter those shadows are, the softer his skin is going to look. To a point, obviously. Okay, so I'm just sampling from his cheek area and just kind of going over that. Okay, it's the same kind of tone. There we go. I'll sample some in here. I think it's better, like my workflow, I kind of bounce around. I don't stick to one specific area and just stay in that area. I like to jump from side to side. That way I'm kind of hitting the entire thing. Okay, now in this, I'm going too far. All right, I've introduced too much of this orangey color over this red color. All right, so I want to remove some of that. So what I can do on here on this layer is I can add what's called a layer mask. So let's jump to a new document again. Let me erase this. Okay, and I'm going to go to a new layer. So here's my new layer, and I'm just going to paint. Now what's cool about this is that as I'm using this clone stamp, it's actually cloning from that other document. So if I take my flow all the way up, you can see here is that cheek. Okay, so now let's pretend, there's the cheek, let's pretend that I want to erase part of this. I could use the eraser and just go whoop like that. But now what happens if I save this, I come back tomorrow and I want to change that? I need to get his face back in there. I could try to go back to this, try to line up my clone stamp like I had before, and try to lay it out here, but you'll see that I'm off. Okay, so now it doesn't match perfectly. So what we do is, instead of erasing, and this is a bad tool, this tool shouldn't even be in Photoshop. Okay, what we would do is we would create what's called a layer mask. So this guy down here, next to the half circles, is a layer mask. So I click on that, and you'll see that next to my layer I get this thing. And if you look at it, you can see there's a difference as I click on one to the other. Okay, even up here it'll say layer 1 comma layer mask. Here, layer 1 RGB. Here, layer 1 layer mask. So if I'm on here and I go to my paintbrush, what this allows me to do is paint white in areas I want to see of this layer and areas of black that I don't want to see. So if I'm painting in white right now, and I just start painting, nothing's going to be different because it's showing me exactly what's already there. This layer mask is already white. If I hit the X key to swap to the colors down here, now I'm painting in black. And then as I paint in black, you can see that I'm actually erasing some of this. I'll take my opacity back up. Okay, but I'm not actually erasing it. All I'm doing is creating a mask. I'm creating a way to kind of hide some of that image. That's what I'm doing, is just hiding that part of the image. It's still there. Here's my layer mask. If I switch back to white by hitting X and I start painting, you'll see that that all comes back. Okay, so a layer mask is one of those necessary tools that we need to be able to paint things we want to see, things we don't want to see. So in here, as I'm kind of saying, you know, I've gone a little bit too far with this color and now he's looking really flat, and I really want to just decrease the amount of correction here. If I go to the eraser, you know, that doesn't look natural. But what I can do is create a layer mask, go to my paintbrush, go to my black color, take my flow down some, take my brush hardness down, and I like to make it bigger. And what I can do is just kind of paint over that. Okay, so I'm just softening and adding that back in. So now if we look at this, it looks much better. Okay, and if I decided I went too far, I can go in with my white and just paint right on top of that and bring that original color back in. Or I can switch back to black by hitting X and bring some of that color back that way. Okay, so get used to using layer masks because we're going to use them very often. There we go. Okay. So if we look at this, you can see this is kind of wrinkles, and again, why am I adding a G? Okay, and some more touch-up work in here. Alright, let's go to another new layer, and let's clean up these teeth. What I'm going to do for these, I'm going to delete that, layer 1. I'm going to use a different tool. Okay, now I could, let's just pretend I'm using the stamping tools. I could try to clean these up, but you'll see that they're all pretty much the same color. We just have to kind of whiten them, get rid of some of that yellow that's in there. Never been this close to a guy's mouth. And he also has a little bit of spit that I'm noticing right there we have to get rid of. Let's go to make a new layer real quick, or we can just erase some of the spit. And when I say erase, I just mean clone stamp over. Okay. So I'm shrinking my brush. I'm on the clone stamp tool. I'm holding Alt. I'm clicking on the area I want to clone stamp from. Shrinking my brush even more. And I'm just painting in that area. See, I'm just painting that black. I don't want to paint actual black because then what happens is black is too black. You know, that isn't a true black color there. There we go. Okay, that's actually if I zoomed in and I hid my pixel grid under View, Show Pixel Grid, you can actually see there's many different color variations inside here, and that's what makes your image look realistic. There we go. He also has a tiny bit of spit right here. So I'll go with my clone stamp again, and it takes, you know, just a little bit of movement inside here just to kind of correct that. There we go. Oops. Good. Okay. So now we're going to clean up the teeth. So here's how we're going to do it is this little guy right here is the layer mask, right? So this guy right there, this is adjustments. So what I want to do is I'm going to add a hue and saturation. Okay. Now you'll see that we get this little swatch here, plus we get this thing. This is a mask. It's all white, meaning that we see everything that's in the mask. So as I take the saturation down, you see that everything becomes desaturated. But if I go to this mask, make my brush bigger, oops, and I start painting black, I'm re-adding that color back in there by eliminating this hue and saturation. It's going to take some time to get your brain wrapped around these things. Okay, and we can actually do this kind of effect on our final image, just to kind of help separate him from his background. All right, but you can see what we're doing here is we're applying this hue and saturation, or we're removing that hue and saturation. All right, so what I want to do is let me take this hue and saturation, and I'm going to go to Edit Fill, and I'm just going to fill it with the background color of black. There we go. Okay, so basically anything I do now to this hue and saturation is not going to affect the image because that layer mask is black. It's not affecting anything. Think of black as 0. 0 effect on those pixels. White, 100% effect. Gray, somewhere in the middle. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to paint on this layer mask with white to kind of show these things. Now it's kind of hard to see what is actually being painted. So I'm going to go to my hue and saturation, and I'm just going to, I'm just going to play with the settings until, there we go, until I get something that's drastic, until I can see, okay, there's definitely something there. Then I can go back to my mask and just start painting inside here. Okay. Now there's 100 different ways to get the selection of this. To grab these teeth to adjust their coloring. I can right click and just adjust the hardness on that. Okay, this is one way. Let me take that. Another way I can do it is if I go to my original image and I go to this wand up here and I go to the quick select, I can paint the selection of these teeth. Now as I do this, you see that actually the gums are getting selected also. Okay. So for this, it's not going to work. Alright, I'm getting the gums in here. I want to select just the teeth, but I'm getting the gums. Let me just Control D to deselect that. I could try the magic wand tool. Maybe adjust some of the tolerance. Let's say 25. Let's say 60. And I'm just shift clicking all these areas here. Oops. And you'll see that at one point I actually grabbed and it selected a lot of the face. Alright. I can go into the lasso and try one of the magnetic lasso tools. And this I just kind of marquee. And what it does is it tries to find the edge of those teeth. Okay. But again, I think with this I'm going to have a hard time getting as close to the edge without getting those gums in there as I was. Alright, so what we're going to do is we're just going to use the paintbrush. We're just going to literally paint these teeth. So we're back on this layer mask, we're back on white. I'm using my paintbrush and I'm just painting these teeth. As we get further in the class, we'll learn more methods. I just don't want to get into those other methods right now. Okay, and if you do make a mistake, then you just switch to white. I'm sorry, switch to black, and you're painting. Now it's going to be confusing because we're painting with white and we're seeing black, but just think of we're painting white in order to see the layer effect, in order to see that hue and saturation. Okay, and like I said, it's going to take, let me put this flow all the way up. It's going to take some time to get used to using the layer mask and understanding what the layer mask is doing, but just some time will really help you to get that knowledge under your belt. Okay, let me pause the video and I'll come back after I've painted all the teeth. Alright, so now all of his teeth are painted. If I missed something or if I realize that I went too far, I can always adjust that later. You can see I didn't get right to the edge of those teeth. Okay, so we'll adjust some stuff later. It looks actually kind of funny. So now we can go back to the hue and saturation, and then we can take this lightness up, and look at, he's got green teeth. Okay, I'm going to take the colorize off. I'm just going to reset these values to 0, 0, and 0. And then now we're back to the original image. So now I can take the saturation and just desaturate it a bit. And maybe even lighten them a bit. Okay. Now again, this is something where we want to adjust it on the opacity of that layer. Here's the original, here's his new one. They actually look like it's a pretty good match. Okay, now you can see back here, actually a bit strong. Okay, so I'm going to go back to that layer mask. I'm going to go back to my black, so I'm erasing. And let me take my flow down some. Make sure my hardness is down. And I'm just kind of hitting the edges of this just to kind of soften that transition. No one's teeth are perfectly white over the entire thing, right? So you want to make it look real. Okay, so I'm just introducing maybe just a little bit of yellow inside here. Now this is a dental campaign, maybe we would change it up a little bit, right? And this, I'm just going a little bit further because we have a little bit too much yellow in some of these areas. There we go. Alright, so that's good there. Let's take this opacity down some. Maybe to 50. Right, you see a definite improvement in his dental hygiene by going to 50. It doesn't look like he bleaches. You know, that kind of looks like he's bleaching his teeth. But at 50, it looks more natural, looks more normal. Okay. Alright, so now let's go back to this extras layer. I'm going to remove some of these hairs from up here. Let's call this teeth, by the way. And then go back to our extra layer. Then we can go to our clone stamp. Start stamping out some of this stuff here. I'm going to borrow some of the information from here. You try to borrow it from stuff that's close to it, okay? But you got to be careful, you know, you're maintaining the same values. It's very easy to kind of go too far and make it worse than it originally was. Let me take my flow down. I'm trying to make sure I get the color kind of smooth transition from the nose to the forehead. It can be a tricky area to blend nicely. Make the flow down even more. I flattened his nose out. I lost that rounding right here. Yep, see, okay, I went way too far there. So let's drop a layer mask on here. Let's switch to black with our brush. Okay, so I'm on the brush, black, I'm on the layer mask. I'm just going to hit that area just to bring that back in. Okay, I'm still on the 17% flow. Let's take that down. Let's make the brush a little bit bigger. Just kind of drop in some of this coloring back in. There we go. What's really throwing it is how glossy this is, how glossy that isn't. Alright, that'll be good for now. Alright, let's go down here and adjust some of this. So let's go to our spot healing. And we have to make sure we're on the layer. If I'm on this layer mask, it doesn't work. There we go. Now he doesn't have that big highlight on his chin. There's a little mark there where he's missed his shaving. There we go. Alright, so overall this is pretty decent. If we take our changes here, I grab all 5 layers, so I just click the top, shift click the bottom, I go to this, and I go to new group from layers, I'll call this adjustments. Here's the original, here's that. He's still recognizable, it's just the image has been improved. Okay, let's go back down and start adjusting some of these even more. Like I said, we don't want to totally get rid of all the wrinkles. We just want them to seem not as bold as they were. Okay, we can even adjust some of these here. Let's go back to the wrinkle touch-up. I'm going to soften some of these. There we go. I'll adjust a little bit more right there. Okay, so once you understand these tools, these are just common things that are done to portraits. If you've seen any senior pictures, you know, they're all over it. I think this line here is just a little bit too harsh. There we go. Okay, so there's obviously more stuff that we can adjust, but let's leave it there. Alright, so now we have this, so let's just call this facial adjustments. Alright, so now let's take that background and just knock the background out, so it's not full color and he's kind of standing out more. Okay, we want it to be some color, but not just full blown. So I'm going to click on this little half circle. I'm going to go to hue and saturation. I'm going to take the saturation down. Now this thing here, it actually affects everything below it. It doesn't just affect you know, the layer right below it. It affects everything. Okay, so just so you can see, if I make a new layer and I put it above it, and I go in here and I choose red. Oops. Make sure I'm painting with a brush. You'll see that that red is a full-blown red. There's no there we go. There's no hiding it. But once I take this hue and saturation, put it above it, now that red becomes a grayscale version of it. Okay. So now that we have this and we've taken out the color, what we can do is just go through and paint black where we don't want the color adjustment to happen. Okay. So basically him. We don't want he to be color corrected. Okay, and you can see this process is, you know, it's not really a clean process right now. It'll get cleaner once we know a little bit more tools. So I just go in with a big brush and I just go, make sure I grab his whole face here, over his whole head like that. Good. And then I shrink my brush and use white and just kind of go around these outer pieces. And I'm holding my finger on X, that way I can add stuff in with white and take stuff out with black. Okay, so I'm taking the color out with black, or with white, and I'm adding the color in with black. Okay, and if you look over here, you can see the guy should be painted all black, and the background should be painted all white. Okay, and like I said, there are other ways to do this, but I want you to just get kind of comfortable with the process of what this layer mask is doing so that you understand it for future assignments, because it'll be imperative to your future assignments. Also, this is great for learning some of the hotkeys because you're just using spacebar to move around. So you hold space and you drag it around. And then you're using X to switch between your colors. Here. And if you, like I said, if you had a tablet, it just comes, it's one of those assignments where it just really helps to have a tablet for, because it's a lot of practice. And they've actually come down in price. They were, you know, a lot of money, $500, $600 for a tablet. And now you can probably find one for $100. Not the best tablet, but definitely one that'll get you started. Alright, so now he's separated from the background. Now we could also kind of check this. If we hold Alt and we click on him, we can see where the coloring is. And if I look at this, I can see, okay, well, I've missed some spots here. I would definitely want to make sure I go in with white and paint on these spots. Here's his ear. I'm going to have to check that out. I'll Alt click it again. Yeah, and I definitely missed this here. Should be white. There we go. And here's another spot. Now it's not a huge deal breaker because we didn't notice it, but it helps to be kind of anal about these things and get it as neatly as you can, because in some areas you're just going to miss it. In some areas you're not going to see that you missed it, and then you'll turn in your work and then you have a Photoshop disaster on your hands. Alright, there we go. Alright, his ear could use a little bit more tweaking, but for right now I think we're good. Okay. So, like I said, we don't want to take this hue and saturation all the way off. I do want to lighten it a little bit though. Okay? So I could do it a couple ways. I could take the saturation all the way off and adjust my opacity here, which I prefer to do just because it's easier to adjust this than to have to pop this open too. But you can see how that kind of pops him out from the background a little bit more. And it makes it not look like we hid all the coloring. Okay, the colors are still there. They're just not as pronounced as they were before. Okay, so he really looks like he is really standing out from the background compared to that. Okay, so we're going to go with that. And then finally, we're just going to add a vignette to this. And vignettes are good for just adding even more highlight or emphasis to the foreground. Let's rename this one. So this will be BG Hue Desaturate. And then this, we're going to just fill with black. That's not black. So I made sure black was my foreground color, and I hit Alt Backspace. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my selection here. I'll just grab a circle, the ellipse, and just kind of position it here. I'm clicking and dragging, and then I can hold Shift to move it around. Something like that. Let's go to Select, Modify, Feather, put in 100. There we go. And then we're just going to drop a layer mask on it. There we go. Now you see what happened is it did the opposite. That's no big deal, because once we're already clicked on the layer mask, we just hit Control or Command and hit I. And you'll see that what it does, it flips that around so that now the layer mask is opposite. Here it is, white circle with a black background, black circle with a white background. And then we can just take the opacity and just adjust it. Okay. We could also still go in here with a brush, and we have to make sure it's a big brush. If it's too small of a brush, it will not look right. Also, hardness is all the way off. And then I just paint with white, with black, in these areas of his face, and I can paint with white in these other areas I definitely want to make sure are knocked out. Okay, so essentially he's going to be more in focus or more presented than the rest of it. Okay, so you can see the difference here. Now this isn't, let me show you an example of a bad vignette. Make it black. We'll go to our marquee. We'll drop a layer mask on here. We'll invert it. Okay, and I'll even play with the opacity. I get this a lot. Not a lot, more than I should. Where it's just this harsh line. And that's not what you want it to look like. You want it to look soft, and you want it to look subtle. This one looks soft and subtle. You don't even really notice that it's there. Okay, but this one you definitely do. Okay, even if I kept this up to 100%, and let me go in with, actually I can go to filter, blur, and I can just do a blur on this. Okay, and then I can go in with my black and just erase him, and you'll see this doesn't look subtle either. Okay, it looks like he is really standing out from the background. All right. We want it to look natural. We want it looks like there's a flash is what happened. So we want it to look smooth and subtle. We don't want it to look crazy. So that's much better than it was. I just don't like his collar here. Seems like it's highlighting. There we go. Alright, so that's good there. Alright, so now let's delete this other layer. Let's call this vignette. And you can do other stuff too. I just use the black. We could also use, a levels. And I could have just made this whole thing super dark. And then use my mask to bring him back into it. Like that, and then adjusted some of this. Okay, there's a bunch of different ways to kind of add this vignette. I'm just showing you the easiest way to do it, or the easiest way I think to do it. Okay, so now let's save this as. I should have saved this the whole time, a long time ago. Sarcona, face, or PhotoRetouch. I just want to do a couple more things to him afterwards. Let's take this adjustment layer here, and I'm going to do a photo filter. And what this is basically it just kind of adjusts some of the coloring in it just to kind of enhance it. You can see the background, you really see it. See some of that orange being added in there. Okay, and depending on what kind of image you want, you could change the different kind of photo filter or adjust it yourself. Okay, let me take this density up higher. Oops, I turn it on. That's why we weren't seeing it. Okay, so you can see what it's doing. Let's go back to filter so we can see these. So you can see just in his skin tone how it's adjusting those colors. So I'm just going to try to find one that I like. I think this blue is probably just too blue. I like the warmer ones. Again, turn it on. Alright, now let's turn it off, turn it on. You can definitely see he has a little bit more of a glow to him than he did before. Okay, I'm going to tone this down a little bit, maybe 50%. But it definitely helps kind of tie everything together and make it look much nicer than the original. So let's grab all this stuff again. New group from layers. Final adjustments. There we go. And then you can see here's the original, here's our new one. Okay, a definite improvement over that original image. Okay, and because this is a group here, we could actually, if we wanted to, we could, adjust the opacity overall if we realized that everything needed to come down or go up or whatever. Okay, so there's your PSD. Save it again. There you go. And so you're just going to turn in this PSD to your Dropbox folder and then share the link with me, just like we did in the first one. And that's it. So hope you enjoyed it, and we'll move on to the next one.